Have you ever felt like your life was breaking apart? Perhaps you worked hard for something, only to lose it. Perhaps you trusted someone, only to be betrayed. Perhaps you spent years building a career, a relationship, or a dream, and then, in one unexpected moment, everything changed. When that happens, we often ask ourselves the same question: why me? We look at what we have lost, and forget to ask what we can still become. If you are going through a difficult season in your life, stay with Zen Sunrise Life. Because tonight's story carries a lesson from more than 2,000 years ago. A lesson about failure, a lesson about loss, and most importantly, a lesson about beginning again. Our story takes us back to the spring and autumn period, a time when powerful kingdoms fought for land, influence, and survival. Warriors were trained from childhood. A man's reputation could determine his future. Victory brought honor, defeat brought shame. And for many young warriors, losing was not simply painful, it was unbearable. In a small village near the border of the state of Wu, there lived a young swordsman named Chen. Chen had dreamed of becoming a great warrior since he was a child. His father had been a soldier. His grandfather had also served in the army. From the moment Chen could walk, he was surrounded by stories of courage, stories of battles, stories of men who had become legends. His father often told him, "A warrior's sword is not only a weapon, it is his honor." Chen believed those words completely. He trained every morning before sunrise. He practiced until his hands were covered with blisters. He trained in the rain. He trained in the cold. He trained when he was tired. And when other young men were resting, Chen was still practicing. By the age of 20, he had become one of the most skilled swordsmen in his village. People admired him. Young boys followed him. Older men spoke proudly of his talent, and every time someone praised him, Chen's confidence grew. But slowly, something else grew with it. Pride. Chen no longer wanted simply to become better. He wanted to become the best. He wanted people to remember his name. He wanted his father to be proud, and more than anything, he was terrified of failure. One autumn morning, a military commander visited the village. He was looking for young warriors to join the army. The villagers gathered in the town square. One by one, the young men demonstrated their skills. When Chen stepped forward, the crowd became silent. He drew his sword. Then he moved. His blade cut through the air with remarkable speed. One strike, two, three. Every movement was precise. When he finished, the crowd applauded. The commander nodded. "You have trained well." Chen smiled proudly. "Thank you, Commander. You will join us." That evening, Chen returned home excited. His father was sitting outside the house. When Chen told him the news, the old man smiled. Then he said something unexpected. "Remember, do not become attached to your sword." Chen frowned. "What do you mean?" His father looked at the sword hanging from his son's waist. "A sword can be lost. A reputation can be lost. Even victory can be lost. But the person holding the sword can always learn to rise again." Chen did not understand. To him, his sword represented everything: his training, his honor, his future, his identity. He believed that as long as he had his sword, he could face anything. Several weeks later, Chen left the village with the army. For the first time, he saw a real battlefield. It was nothing like the stories. There was no glory in the smoke, no beauty in the sound of weapons. Men were frightened, horses screamed, the ground was covered with mud, and every decision could mean life or death. During the first battle, Chen fought bravely. He followed his commander. He protected the soldiers beside him. And when the enemy advanced, he did not retreat. But the battle became more chaotic than anyone expected. The enemy surrounded their position. Orders became difficult to hear. Soldiers became separated. Chen fought desperately to reach his unit. Then, a powerful strike hit his sword. Crack! His blade broke. Chen froze. For a moment, the entire battlefield seemed to disappear. He looked down at the broken sword in his hand. The weapon he had trained with for years was broken. And something inside him broke with it. He suddenly felt powerless. Without his sword, who was he? He tried to move backward. An enemy soldier approached. Chen raised the broken blade, but his confidence was gone. He was no longer thinking about survival. He was thinking about failure. He could hear his father's voice in his mind. A warrior's sword is his honor. The words repeated again and again. His sword was broken. His honor was broken. His dream was broken. At that moment, Chen believed everything was over. But just before the enemy reached him, an older soldier rushed between them. The old warrior blocked the attack. "Move!" Chen stood frozen. "Move!" the old soldier shouted again. Chen finally stepped away. Together, they escaped the battlefield. That night, the army withdrew into the mountains. Hundreds of soldiers were exhausted. Some were wounded. Some had lost friends. Some had lost everything. Chen sat alone beside a small fire. In his hands, he held the broken sword. He stared at it for hours. The blade that had once represented his strength now looked useless. The old soldier who had saved him approached. He sat beside Chen. "You fought well." Chen shook his head. "I failed." The old man looked at the broken sword. "Why?" "My sword broke." The old soldier smiled. "And?" Chen looked at him. "What do you mean?" "The sword broke. Not you." Chen remained silent. The old man picked up a small branch from the ground. He held it in his hand. "Do you know what happens when a tree loses a branch?" Chen shook his head. "It grows another. But the new branch does not look like the old one." "Why?" "Because the tree has changed." The old soldier looked at Chen. "Perhaps your life is doing the same." Chen lowered his eyes. He still did not understand. But for the first time that night, he stopped staring at what he had lost, and began wondering what could still grow. The old soldier stood up. "Sleep. Tomorrow, we begin again." Chen looked down at the broken sword. For years, he had believed strength meant never breaking. Now, he was beginning to discover another truth. Sometimes, life breaks the thing we thought we needed most, so that we can discover who we truly are without it. The next morning, Chen would face a decision that would change the direction of his life. Would he remain trapped by the failure of yesterday, or would he learn to walk forward, with nothing but the strength he still carried inside? The morning came quietly. A pale light slowly appeared between the mountains. The soldiers were already awake. Some prepared their weapons. Others tended to the wounded. A few stared silently into the distance, thinking about the friends they had lost. Chen remained beside the small fire. The broken sword was still in his hands. He had not slept much. All night, he had been thinking about the old soldier's words. The sword broke. Not you. But Chen still struggled to believe them. For years, he had measured his worth through his sword. When the sword was strong, he felt strong. When people praised his skills, he felt valuable. When he won, he felt worthy. And now, the sword was broken. The praise was gone. The victory was gone. And for the first time, Chen had to face himself without the things that once made him feel important. The old soldier approached him again. His name was Master Han. He had spent more than 40 years serving in the army. "Come with me," Han said. Chen stood. "Where?" "You are going to learn how to fight again." Chen looked at his broken sword. "With this?" Han smiled. "No, without it." Chen was confused. Master Han led him away from the camp. They walked toward a quiet forest behind the mountain. There was a small clearing surrounded by tall trees. Han stopped. "Attack me." Chen stared at him. "With what?" "Your hands." Chen laughed bitterly. "I cannot fight without a weapon." Han looked at him. "That is exactly what you need to understand." Chen stepped forward. He raised his fists. Han moved aside effortlessly. Chen attacked again. Han stepped backward. Again, and again. Every time Chen attacked, Han avoided him without striking back. After several minutes, Chen became frustrated. "I cannot do this," Han replied calmly. "You are trying to fight the way you fought before. What is wrong with that?" "Everything." Chen looked at him. "You are still thinking about your sword." Han pointed toward Chen's hands. "Your hands are empty. But your mind is still holding a sword." Chen said nothing. Han continued. "You are not defeated because your sword broke. You are defeated because you decided that the broken sword means you are broken too." Those words struck Chen deeply. He looked away. For the first time, he realized that the battlefield had not taken his strength. his own thoughts had. Han walked toward a nearby tree. He pointed at a branch that had been broken by the storm. Look. Chen followed his gaze. The branch was hanging from the tree. It was damaged, but the tree was still alive. New leaves were beginning to appear around the wound. Han said, "Nature does not waste time asking why the branch broke. It simply begins healing. Human beings are different. We stare at the broken branch. We touch the wound. We remember how beautiful it was before, and sometimes we spend years wishing it had never broken." Chen looked at the tree. Those words reminded him of his own life. How often had he done the same? When he failed, he replayed the failure. When someone criticized him, he remembered the words for years. When he lost something, he kept asking why. Perhaps he had been living inside yesterday. Master Han turned toward him. "Chen?" "Yes?" "Do you want your old sword back?" Chen hesitated. "Yes." "Why?" "Because it was given to me by my father." Han nodded. "Then keep it." Chen looked surprised. "Keep it?" "Yes." "But it is broken." "That is why you should keep it." Han reached into his bag and pulled out a small piece of cloth. He carefully wrapped the broken sword. Your sword does not need to be restored to what it was. It only needs to remind you of what you have learned. Chen held the wrapped sword against his chest. "What have I learned?" Han smiled. "That losing something does not mean losing yourself." For the next several weeks, Chen trained differently. He no longer trained to impress anyone. He no longer tried to become the strongest warrior in the camp. He trained to understand himself. Every morning before sunrise, he ran through the forest. He practiced balance. He learned to use a wooden staff. He practiced moving without depending on a blade. And most importantly, he learned patience. At first, it was difficult. He was constantly frustrated. He wanted to become strong immediately. He wanted his old confidence back. But Han never allowed him to rush. One morning, Chen complained. "I have trained for weeks. I am still not as good as I was." Han smiled. "Good." Chen frowned. "Why is that good?" "Because now you are finally learning." Chen did not understand. Han explained. "When you were praised, you trained to protect your reputation. When you were admired, you trained to become even more admired. But now, no one is watching. You are training because you want to grow." Chen became silent. The old soldier was right. His entire life, he had been looking outward. Now, he was learning to look inward. One afternoon, a messenger arrived at the camp. The army was preparing for another battle. The enemy had advanced farther into the region. The commander needed every soldier. Chen looked at the wooden staff in his hands, then at the wrapped, broken sword beside him. For the first time, he was not afraid. Not because he believed he could never fail again, but because he had finally accepted that failure was possible. And if he failed, he could still rise. The next morning, the soldiers marched toward the battlefield. Some looked nervous, others looked confident. Chen walked quietly among them. One young soldier noticed that he was carrying no sword. He laughed. "Where is your famous weapon?" Chen looked at him. "It broke." The young soldier smiled. "Then how will you fight?" Chen looked toward the mountains. "I will use what I have." The young soldier laughed again, but Chen did not respond. He had learned something important. Not every question deserved an answer. Not every opinion needed to be corrected. Not every insult required a battle. They continued walking. By afternoon, the army reached a narrow valley. The enemy was waiting. Their numbers were greater. Their weapons were ready. The commander gave the order. The battle began. Chen moved with his unit. At first, he felt strange without his sword. His hands instinctively searched for the weapon that was no longer there. But then, he remembered Han's lesson. Your mind is still holding a sword. Chen took a deep breath. He stopped thinking about what he had lost, and began paying attention to what was happening around him. An enemy soldier charged. Chen stepped aside. He used the wooden staff to redirect the attack. Another soldier came from behind. Chen turned, blocked, moved, countered. He was not fighting like the warrior he had been. He was fighting like someone who had finally learned to adapt. His movements were slower, but calmer. He no longer fought with anger. He no longer tried to overpower every opponent. He observed. He waited. He moved when the moment was right. Then something unexpected happened. The enemy commander ordered a group of soldiers to attack the army's weakest position. The formation began to collapse. Several soldiers panicked. The commander shouted orders, but the noise of battle made it difficult to hear. Chen looked around. He saw the problem. A narrow passage beside the river had been left unprotected. If the enemy reached it, the entire unit would be surrounded. Chen ran toward the passage. 3 soldiers followed him. They reached the river just before the enemy. The enemy soldiers charged. Chen raised his wooden staff. For a brief moment, he remembered the broken sword, the weapon he had once believed he could not live without. Then he smiled, because he finally understood. The sword had never been his strength. His discipline was, his courage was, his ability to adapt was, and the greatest strength of all was the willingness to begin again. Chen stood his ground. The enemy charged, and this time, he did not fight to prove that he was the greatest warrior. He fought simply because someone needed to stand there. The battle continued into the evening, and when the sun finally began to disappear, the army was still standing. Chen looked at his wooden staff. It was cracked, almost broken. He smiled. Then he looked toward the horizon. For the first time in his life, he was not afraid of broken things. Because he had learned that something can be damaged and still have purpose. Something can end and still lead to a new beginning. Something can break and still teach you how to become stronger. That night, Chen returned to the camp. Master Han was waiting beside the fire. He looked at the cracked wooden staff. Then he smiled. "You understand now." Chen nodded. "My sword broke. But I did not." Han shook his head. "No, you became stronger. Because it broke." Chen looked into the fire, and for the first time, he understood the strange gift hidden inside failure. Sometimes, the thing we fear losing the most is the very thing that teaches us we were never dependent on it. 3 days after the battle, the army moved deeper into the mountains. The soldiers were tired. Their clothes were covered with dust. Their faces showed the weight of war. But Chen was different. Something inside him had changed. He no longer looked at the broken sword with shame. He carried it inside his cloth bag. Not because he believed it was still useful, but because it reminded him of the person he had once been. A young man who believed his strength came from a weapon. A young man who believed his value depended on victory. A young man who was terrified of losing. Now, Chen was beginning to understand that sometimes losing something is the beginning of finding yourself. One afternoon, the army stopped near a small mountain village. The commander ordered the soldiers to rest. Chen walked toward the village to find water. As he approached the well, he noticed an old woman struggling to carry 2 heavy buckets. Chen immediately walked toward her. "Let me help you." The woman looked at him carefully. "You are a soldier." "Yes." "Have you been fighting?" Chen nodded. She looked at his empty sword belt. "Where is your sword?" Chen smiled. "It broke." The woman looked surprised. "You lost your weapon?" "Yes." "Then you must be a poor warrior." Chen paused. Months ago, those words would have hurt him. He would have defended himself. He would have explained how many battles he had fought. He would have told her about his training. But this time, he simply smiled. "Perhaps." The woman stared at him. Then she laughed softly. "You are different from the other soldiers." "How?" "They all tell me how strong they are. You are the first one who does not." Chen helped her carry the buckets. As they walked, the woman suddenly said, "My husband was a soldier." Chen looked at her. "He died many years ago." "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "Don't be. He died protecting his village." Then she looked at Chen. "Your sword may be broken, but if your heart still knows what it is protecting, you are not unarmed." Chen became silent. Those simple words stayed in his mind. That evening, he returned to the camp. Master Han was sitting beside the fire. Chen told him about the old woman. Han listened quietly. Then he asked, "What did you learn?" Chen thought for a moment. "That a weapon is not what makes a person strong." Han nodded. "And?" Chen looked into the flames. "That perhaps we should not be ashamed of what we have lost." "Why?" "Because sometimes, Loss teaches us what success never could. Master Han smiled. Now you are beginning to understand. The next morning, a messenger arrived. The enemy army was approaching again. The commander gathered his officers. A difficult decision had to be made. The enemy had chosen a narrow mountain pass. If they captured it, the entire army would be trapped. General Ren studied the map. We cannot defend every position. One officer pointed toward the eastern road. We should retreat. Another disagreed. If we retreat, the enemy will follow us into the valley. The officers began arguing. Voices became louder. Everyone wanted to prove that their strategy was correct. Chen stood quietly at the edge of the tent. He listened. He remembered the man he had been only a few months earlier. He would have wanted to speak first. He would have wanted everyone to hear his idea. He would have wanted to prove that he was intelligent. But now, he waited. Then General Ren looked toward him. Chen, what do you see? Everyone became silent. Chen walked toward the map. He studied it carefully. The enemy believes we will retreat. The commander looked at him. Why? Because the mountain pass appears impossible to defend. He pointed toward a small river on the map. But they have overlooked this. If we move our smaller unit through the forest, we can reach the river before them. And? We do not need to defeat their entire army. We only need to prevent them from reaching the pass. General Ren looked at the map. Slowly. A smile appeared on his face. Good. The officers began preparing. This time, Chen was not given a great army. He was given only a small group of soldiers. But he no longer cared about numbers. He understood something now. A person does not become powerful because of what they possess. They become powerful because of how wisely they use what remains. The group moved through the forest before dawn. They traveled quietly. No drums, no banners, no shouting, only footsteps beneath the trees. When they reached the river, they discovered the enemy was already approaching. Chen looked at his small group. There were only 30 soldiers. The enemy had hundreds. One young soldier whispered, "We cannot win." Chen looked at him. "We do not need to win the whole war. We only need to protect this place." The soldiers nodded. Chen gave the order. They moved into position. When the enemy arrived, they expected no resistance. But suddenly, arrows flew from the trees. The enemy stopped. Then another group attacked from the opposite side. Confusion spread through their ranks. Chen's soldiers did not chase them. They did not waste energy. They struck only when necessary. They moved. They disappeared. They appeared again. The enemy commander became convinced that a much larger force was surrounding them. He ordered his soldiers to retreat. The mountain pass remained safe. The battle had been won without a great army. Without a famous sword. Without a heroic speech. Only patience, observation, and discipline. When Chen returned to camp, the soldiers welcomed him. But this time, he did not feel proud because people praised him. He felt grateful because his men had survived. Master Han approached. "You did well." Chen bowed. "Thank you." The old soldier looked at him carefully. "Are you proud?" Chen thought about the question. Then he answered, "Yes." Han smiled. "Good." Chen looked surprised. "You once told me not to seek praise." "I did." "Then why are you asking if I am proud?" Han laughed. "Because humility does not mean refusing to recognize your own growth." He placed a hand on Chen's shoulder. "Never confuse humility with weakness." Chen listened carefully. You can be proud of what you have accomplished, without believing you are better than everyone else. You can accept praise, without becoming dependent on it. You can acknowledge your strength, without needing to display it. Chen nodded. Those words felt important. For so long, he had moved between two extremes. First, he wanted everyone to know how strong he was. Then, he became afraid that accepting recognition would make him arrogant. Now he understood there was another path. A quiet confidence. A person could know their value, without shouting it. That night, Chen finally opened the cloth bag. He took out the broken sword. He placed it beside the fire. Then he carefully examined the damaged blade. There was a strange beauty in it now. The sword was no longer a symbol of failure, it was a reminder. A reminder that life can break what we believe defines us. A reminder that losing something does not mean losing everything. A reminder that sometimes, the strongest version of ourselves is born after the version we knew has been broken. Chen picked up the sword. He held it against his chest. Then he whispered, "Thank you." Not to the sword, but to the lesson it had given him. Years later, people would tell stories about Chen. They would speak about the battles he had survived. They would speak about his wisdom. They would say he became one of the most respected warriors of his generation. But very few people knew that his greatest victory had happened long before anyone called him a hero. It happened on the night his sword broke. Because that was the night he finally understood he could lose the weapon without losing himself. And perhaps that is the lesson life has been trying to teach us all along. Sometimes we lose a job, a relationship, money, a dream, a position, a reputation, something we believed we could not live without. And when it disappears, we feel as if a part of ourselves has disappeared with it. But ask yourself, who were you before you had it? And who might you become after losing it? Perhaps the answer is not found in what remains in your hands, but in what remains in your heart. The broken sword did not end Chen's journey, it began it. And tomorrow, he would face the final challenge. A challenge that would force him to choose between revenge and forgiveness. Between the person he once was and the person he had learned to become. The final battle came at sunrise. A cold mist covered the valley. The mountains stood silently in the distance, and thousands of soldiers prepared for what could be their most dangerous battle yet. Chen stood among his men. At his side, there was no shining sword, only the old broken blade wrapped carefully in cloth. His weapon was now a simple wooden staff. But Chen no longer felt incomplete. He had learned that a person is not defined by what they carry, but by what they are willing to stand for. General Ren approached him. "The enemy has gathered all their forces." Chen nodded. "Then today will decide everything." The general looked at him. "Are you afraid?" Chen thought for a moment. "Yes." The general smiled. "Good." Chen looked surprised. "Why?" "Because courage does not mean having no fear. It means knowing what matters more than fear." Chen looked toward the valley. He could see the enemy army approaching. Thousands of soldiers, hundreds of horses, flags moving in the wind. The sound of drums grew louder. Boom, boom, boom. The final battle had begun. The two armies collided. The valley disappeared beneath dust and smoke. Chen led his small unit toward the eastern side. Their mission was to protect the villagers who had been caught between the armies. They moved quickly. But suddenly, a group of enemy soldiers surrounded them. Chen looked around. There were too many. One of his soldiers shouted, "We are trapped!" Chen remained calm. He remembered his old self. The young warrior who would have panicked when his sword broke. The young man who believed strength meant overpowering everyone. But that person was gone. Chen looked at the terrain. There was a narrow path behind the rocks. A river flowed below. He turned to his soldiers. "Do not fight them here." "What?" "Move toward the river." The soldiers followed his command. The enemy pursued them. Chen led his men through the narrow path. Then, they reached the river. There was nowhere else to go. The enemy soldiers surrounded them. Their commander stepped forward. And Chen recognized him. It was the same warrior who had shattered his sword months earlier. The man smiled. "So? The great swordsman is still alive." Chen looked at him. The enemy commander laughed. "Where is your famous sword?" Chen remained silent. The commander continued. "I broke it once. I can break you again." For a moment, Chen felt the old anger rise inside him. He remembered the battlefield, the sound of the sword breaking, the shame, the fear, the helplessness. He wanted revenge. He wanted to prove that he was stronger now. His hand tightened around the wooden staff. Then, he remembered Master Han. "Do not let yesterday control tomorrow." Chen took a deep breath. He looked at the enemy commander. "I have no need to defeat you." The commander laughed. "Then why are you standing here?" "To protect my people." The enemy commander raised his weapon. "Then you will die protecting them." The attack began. Chen fought. But he did not fight with hatred. He fought with clarity. Every movement was controlled. Every step had purpose. He avoided unnecessary strikes. He protected the soldiers beside him. The enemy commander attacked again and again, but Chen remained calm. Finally, the commander lost his balance. Chen had the opportunity to strike him down. His wooden staff was raised. One movement, and it would be over. But Chen stopped. The enemy commander looked up. "Why don't you finish it?" Chen lowered his staff. "Because I have already defeated you." The man stared at him. "What? You broke my sword. You thought that meant you broke me. But you were wrong." Chen stepped back. The person who needed to prove himself died the day that sword broke. Today, I no longer need revenge. The enemy commander stared at him in silence. For the first time, he understood. The strongest warrior before him was not the man who could strike hardest. It was the man who no longer needed to. Suddenly, a horn sounded from the distant battlefield. The enemy army was retreating. General Ren's forces had broken through the center. The battle was over. The enemy commander lowered his weapon. He looked at Chen. "You could have killed me." "Yes." "Why didn't you?" Chen answered. "Because victory does not always mean destroying your enemy. Sometimes, victory means refusing to become the person your enemy wants you to become." The commander looked away. He said nothing. Then he walked toward his retreating soldiers. Chen watched him disappear into the mist. The villagers were safe. His soldiers were alive. And the war was finally coming to an end. That evening, the army gathered beside the river. The sun was setting behind the mountains. General Ren approached Chen. "You had the chance to kill the enemy, Commander." Chen nodded. "Why did you spare him?" Chen looked at the broken sword inside his cloth bag. "Because I have spent too much of my life trying to prove that I am strong. I don't want to spend the rest of it proving that I am powerful." The general smiled. "Now you understand the difference." Chen looked at him. "What difference?" "The difference between strength and power. Power can destroy. Strength knows when not to." Chen remained silent. The sun slowly disappeared beyond the mountains. For a long time, neither man spoke. Then General Ren said, "Your father would be proud." Chen looked down. "I hope so." The next morning, the soldiers began their journey home. Chen walked beside Master Han. For several miles, neither spoke. Finally, Chen asked, "Master." "Yes? Why did you save me that day?" Han smiled. "Because you were not ready to die." Chen laughed. "I mean, why did you teach me?" The old soldier stopped walking. He looked toward the mountains. "Because many young warriors know how to fight. Very few know how to lose." Chen thought about those words. "Why is learning to lose so important?" Han answered, "Because life will eventually take something from every person. Your youth, your strength, your money, your loved ones, your plans, your dreams. And when that day comes, you will have only one choice. Either allow the loss to destroy you, or allow it to transform you." Chen looked toward the sunrise. For the first time, he understood. The broken sword had not been his greatest tragedy. It had been his greatest teacher. And perhaps, that is true for us too. Maybe you are listening to this story while carrying your own broken sword. Maybe you lost a job. Maybe someone you loved walked away. Maybe a dream you worked years to build suddenly disappeared. Maybe you failed at something, and you still blame yourself. Maybe people told you that you were not good enough, and somewhere inside, you started believing them. But listen carefully. Your life is not over because something broke. You are not a failure because one chapter ended badly. You are not worthless because someone rejected you. You are not weak because you needed to start again. A broken dream does not mean a broken future. A broken relationship does not mean a broken heart forever. A failed business does not mean you can never succeed. A painful chapter does not define the entire story. Sometimes, life removes the thing you were holding onto, because you were never meant to hold it forever. Sometimes, the door that closes behind you forces you to notice the road ahead. And sometimes, the version of yourself that breaks is the version you needed to leave behind. So if something in your life has broken, do not ask only, "Why did this happen to me?" Ask another question. What can this teach me? What can I become because of it? What strength is still alive inside me? You may not have the same life tomorrow. You may not have the same people. You may not have the same opportunities. But you still have something powerful. You still have the ability to choose what you do next. That choice is where your new life begins. Remember Chen. His sword broke, but his spirit did not. His pride broke, and wisdom entered. His old identity broke, and a stronger man was born. Perhaps your broken sword is not the end of your story. Perhaps it is the beginning of the person you were always meant to become. So tonight, if you are struggling, be patient with yourself. If you have failed, begin again. If you have lost something, allow yourself to grieve, but do not build your home inside the past. Stand up slowly. Take one step, then another. You do not need to rebuild your entire life in one day. You only need enough courage to take the next step. And when tomorrow's sunrise appears, remember this: what broke you yesterday may become the wisdom that strengthens you tomorrow. This is Zen Sunrise Life. Here, we travel through stories from the ancient world, not simply to remember the past, but to discover what those old lessons can teach us about our lives today. If this story gave you even a little strength, subscribe to Zen Sunrise Life. Share this story with someone who may be carrying their own broken sword. And come back for another journey, another ancient story, another lesson for the heart. Until we meet again beneath the morning sun, stay patient, stay humble, keep walking. Because sometimes, the greatest chapter of your life begins after everything you thought you needed has broken.